Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Let the Right One In. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, I'm sure there are probably other people who figured out this long in advance, but I didn't get what was going to happen this episode. You know, the reveal about, that the two storylines aren't parallel. There's a time difference. Because it wasn't until the opening, like the recap where Frank was like, yeah, there's a woman in charge. I was like, wait, Frank said that? I was like, a woman? I was like, wait, Claire. I was like, oh my God, those stories aren't taking place at the same time. I was like, oh, I love it when shows do that. I'm a big fan of like messing with your perception. Because you're under the assumption that those two stories are taking place parallel. But then when you look back on it in retrospect, it's like, well, it makes a lot of sense, because at that point, it's like, right, they're having a conversation about the painkillers and stuff like that. The painkillers were just the regular painkillers. It's not until like, cause we only just got into the whole, it was last episode we introduced, Claire's, her painkiller, and I'm like, oh God, I didn't even think about that. And once again, like, there's probably people who figured that well before now realize, like, those two storylines aren't taking place at the same time. I should have figured this. I completely missed the element of him saying, Frank being like, yeah, it's a woman in charge. It was there the entire time. I just didn't remember. I didn't latch onto that line like I should have. That would have made it clear that, yeah. Because you could have been like, well, maybe it's someone else, but then like when you eventually, because that obviously plays into the fact this is like, right, Claire hadn't, because what sold that even more that it's like it's not at the same time. It's like Claire hadn't taken over by then, because that was all in episode 1, and the story we were told in episode 1, Claire's dad was still alive, so he was still running things. So we know Matthew's the middleman, but what I think is so fascinating is that later on we find out from like Frank knew that it was a woman in charge. How? Like, they insulated that so much. They did it, insulated as much as possible. Everyone that was like the main people that were part of Matthew's unit know about Claire, but none of the dealers are supposed to. So he probably showed up at the place getting supplies when he shouldn't have. And maybe he just happened to be there at the same time Claire was there or something. Because like, how else would he know there was a woman in charge and, that Matthew wasn't the head of this operation? He recognized Matthew, or maybe it was Roland that he specifically was like, oh yeah, like thought he was the middleman. Because Roland is who he probably like was the middleman he dealt with. He probably never directly dealt with Matthew. So either way, I thought that was such a fascinating element. But Matthew's the one that convinced her to kind of, instead of selling her father's painkillers, what they've been doing up until now to make money, he suggested hers because it felt so good. He's like, right, like, he's like, my CO told me there are two things that kind of make someone kind of admit their sins: God or pain. And not everyone believes in God, but everyone believes in pain. And the fact is, he was like, that pill makes me feel like nothing or no one could ever hurt me again. And it's like, yeah, you probably like, you're riding this wave of ecstasy where like nothing can affect you, which, obviously parallels with like the vampirism of it all. But yeah, Claire she started selling them because the payments on the house, like either their dad was still lying, thinking he could just like keep everything under control because he was kind of the control freak he was, that he didn't realize, like, because he made Matthew think like, right, we're going to be fine. Monthly payments is like, no, we need to pay all we owe or this house is going to be sold. And so she didn't want to sell pills initially because she knows like, right, my dad peddled those pills knowing what they did, and he destroyed lives. I don't want to do anything like my father, but if it means still keeping the facility going, keeping the research going, and making sure that she's able to cure her brother, then doing whatever she needs to. And I love the beauty of that because it really parallels very nicely with Mark, who has for the past 10 years done some very deplorable things, done things he's not proud of for the sake of saving his daughter. So it's like, right, they've just taken two very different approaches to the whole thing. Once again, Claire's father was like, no, looking for the creature isn't worth it. Mark is looking for the creature. Claire's coming at it from the scientific point of view of like, right, we're going to like find the cure for all this. And the same thing applies for Mark, but it's like interesting how the drugs are his connection to, what Claire is up to and stuff. But, yeah. Even the fact is that her and Matthew are more in line and more in sync, just like, Mark and Ellie are. It's like, no, like we're not going at this alone. We're going at this together. So both of like Matthew and Claire finding their middle ground, and we see the same thing is applicable in that regard with Ellie and Mark. So I thought that was such a fascinating element to it all. And the sad thing is, by the time Mark and them get there at the end of the episode, they've already packed up the facility because Roland's body was found. Because, really quickly, tying this back into like what we got, Mark had answered some of Roland's questions, and it's like, right, that drug, which Roland was unaware of, because, once again, it's all insulated. Matthew's the only one who knows the ins and outs of the stuff. He knows about the drugs. It's like, well, there's a woman in charge. It's like, how do you know what you know? So why'd you kill my dealer? You need him for my blood. It's like, yeah, they know nothing about the vampire stuff. They're just handling the drug side of things. I think it is poetic that Zeke used, because they made a whole point about him being like, yeah, people buying cheap frames for pictures. He bought a really good custom one and ended up using that to kill Roland. It was just that's some heavy duty material, and all it took was one solid blow. I think it's poetic that it's like, right, he's trying to protect the people he cares about by using a picture of the people he cares about. It's just poetic in that regard. So Mark knows how to, like, right, I got to take advantage of this situation, so he bled Roland out. It's like, right, Ellie's going to need to eat, like, soon anyway, so might as well. And he's like, you got a 36 timer. And then when it wasn't until he was looking, I was like, what's the 36 minutes about? And then he was there's only a couple minutes left, and he's telling Ellie to drink. I was like, okay, so it's kind of the interview with the vampire rules, where it was like, we haven't really gone into why not to do it, but just saying it will kill you. But Louis had told, Lestat had told Louis, don't drink dead blood. We don't do that. We drink fresh blood of the living. So, I guess maybe like a similar rule applies here, that basically the blood is oxidized, I think. So it's like, right, you have 36 minutes until the blood is, or maybe it gets too oxidized and it loses, like it just becomes disgusting at that point to a vampire. Like the nutrient like values that a vampire need, the nutrients from it that a vampire would need, basically get removed. I don't know whether it's a thing of it gets too oxidized or it loses its oxidization being outside of the body for so long. Because obviously the whole thing is like, no, it has to be like it loses its oxidized, it has to, or it gets over oxidized or something like that. I don't know. Because I was about to say, it's like, because like obviously blood turns red because of oxygen, because it's naturally blue inside your body. If I'm remembering my biology at all, which has been over a decade, it's like naturally blue in your body, but it turns red because of the oxidization. It meeting oxygen turns it red. So that's why I was like, I don't know. So maybe it gets over oxidized, and maybe either way, it loses its flair for a vampire. Just because I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because I don't think they brought the timer up before now. So I guess after he got Frank's blood, he probably rushed to get it to Ellie, but I thought that was probably more so like she was starving at that point. That's what I thought that was, but it's like, no, it seems like there's just straight up a time limit to get that blood to a vampire before it's no longer viable, I guess. I mean, I guess it's just like any other situation, probably like getting an organ into a body, you need to like move on that stat before it's no longer viable. So I guess the same thing's applicable with blood when it comes to a vampire, so that was interesting. And the sad thing is, Zeke had been a part of disposing of a body. It's another thing when you're responsible for killing another human. And what really cuts Zeke deep is knowing, like, well, first and foremost, I now found out, like, right, the guy we killed knew nothing about it. So, yeah, he's connected to this drug, which is connected to all of this, but maybe this is all a farce. I'm throwing away my life for nothing because, hey, if we don't cover our tracks properly, because we're the last people this guy was looking into, so if we don't find him, if we don't, like, cover our bases, they'll come after us, they'll kill you, they'll kill me, and this is a wrap, so, but, Marcus said, it's like, oh, I've done this. Like, this ain't my first time having to make bodies disappear. So he threw it in the sewer, and I wonder if that's supposed to be in conjunction with what he knows about Naomi. Like, because Naomi told him enough about the case that maybe he was like, right, maybe I can pin this on one of those other people. So it's like, right, the pills he found on him probably, like, made that seem like, right, one of the people killed Roland, which it did sound like Matthew and Claire might know the side effect about the drug. Like, maybe they don't know the full side effects of it, but maybe they know, like, right. I mean, I guess it's like anyone hooked on drugs can end up getting violent and kill someone just to get the drugs off of them. So, but obviously, like, their drug is super, super potent, but I don't know but, like, it made it sound like they knew about it, like, oh, like, someone must have rode him, trying to get the drugs, but it's like, do they know about the vampiric side effects of it? I don't know. But Claire's it's been 2 months, so she's just kind of going with the flow of things, essentially. So, because she did make that whole point too, like, oh, Peter's skin is recovering, but she's like, yeah, it's going to take, like, I guess, like, superficial enough wounds will heal pretty quickly for a vampire, but massive tissue damage like that and skin damage like that, it's going to take a while for it. But he looked pretty healed up when we got to him at the beginning of the episode, but 2 months later, he still got some of the rough parts of his skin, but more often, I'd say, 85% of his body seems healed, maybe, so. But sadly, Mark did such a good job that sadly they found Roland's body, maybe because, like, the police are investigating the sewers to see if they can find any more bodies, but Roland's body was found, or either, I don't know, not less Mark put his phone back on him after, like, texting him that, oh, everything was fine. Either way, he broke the body up into pieces to make it seem like, one of them ended up, like, one of the drugged up people on Claire's drug tore him apart or something. But because of that, it made them paranoid, like, cool, we shut down shop. So that's why when Mark and them got there, that place was empty. So there's also the situation of obviously Ellie, she's going through a lot. Obviously, she told Isaiah the truth about what she is, and it scared the shit out of Isaiah to the point he's having a nightmare about it later on, but he doesn't know how to react to it, and she's texting him, and she's like, I hope you know how much I like you. It's like, because he's the only friend she's had in so long, the only person she can confide in about all this. She's like, yeah, he was going to figure it out anyway, but she wanted to tell him because she's like, I thought he would like me regardless, even if I told him. And I think it's interesting, the only person she's told this truth to is Zeke. Her dad still doesn't know that she told Isaiah, and I guess, like, Zeke is trying to keep that, because, like, right, him and Eleanor have a good enough relationship. He was like, yo, remember when we used to, like, get, like, whenever your mom and dad were out, like, me and you watch horror movies together? He's like, yeah, not as much the horror movie person, I guess, like, I feel like that's a deeper thing of, like, yeah, when you're connected to this type of world and everything that's going on with Eleanor, probably makes you want to steer away from horror movies. But he's like, yeah, I'm more of a rom-com guy myself. I don't know. It's a throwaway line, but it feels like you could read a lot more into, like, the whole, like, yeah, I'm not into horror movies as much anymore. Just, because of everything that they've been involved in, knowing kind of the more supernatural side of this world and everything. So, I don't know, like I said, easily could be reading too much into it. But, Isaiah wanted to talk to his dad because his dad was a person he probably confided to. I think he had a better relationship with his dad than his mom. So he was like, right, let me talk to dad first, and then I'm going to talk to you about it if dad doesn't get back to me. But Isaiah ends up finding out later on, like, the bullies try to confront him, and Isaiah was like, wait, what'd you say about my dad leaving me again? It was balling up his fist. And the other kid was like, yo, let's leave him alone. This ain't even worth it. It's like, he's the guy that he's the kid Eleanor scared the shit out of and broke his finger. And it's like, what happened to your finger? He's like, have you noticed over the past 2 weeks? And then Isaiah's kind of piecing it together. It's like, right, Eleanor was kind of certain that you weren't going to mess with me. And like, right, Eleanor and everything and the whole, like, right, I told her about you guys and you're suddenly hurt. So now it makes him realize, like, wait, maybe Eleanor's not as bad as I think. Like, right, she uses her powers for good. She helped me, and she scared them away so they would leave me alone. It's like, right, that's why they've left me alone for the past 2 weeks. The other two don't know about it, but home I thought he seemed like he's the leader of the pack, but I guess the bigger kid is the one who's, like, the leader of the pack. They're all dillweeds anyway, but And that's also the problem too. When you're a bully and you look weak in front of other bullies, then you can kind of become the target yourself. That can become an issue later on down the road. Maybe, maybe not. I can definitely see the other two turning on him because they're like, oh, you're so much of a punk now. Like, what are you about to piss yourself over? Like, why won't you like make fun of Isaiah anymore? It's like, well, to be fair, like a lot of the school looks at you like a whole bunch of clowns for doing it anyway, so I'm sure that doesn't help. Which, once again, made them want to bully him even more, because it's like, oh, you embarrassed us, made us look like the fools, so... It's definitely... I'm like I said, I thought because of the Eleanor thing that Home Dude was going to double down and come after him even more, but it's like, no, Eleanor legitimately scared the shit out of him, so, like, he's going to make sure him and his boys don't mess with Isaiah anymore, but we'll see. Sadly, his mom, because of everything that this is all connected to, she talks to her partner Ben about it. So it's like, right, in some shape or form, Frank is most likely connected to this. So they end up going to Frank's apartment. Obviously, he ain't been there for a while. And it speaks volume, just a little thing of, she's like, oh, she thought Isaiah's birthday was going to be his password. And Ben's like, try yours. And she's almost like, it's not going to work. And it does. And it's just like, right, it just makes that even much more complicated for her. But his phone went offline abruptly the last night they saw each other. So she was like, right, she was probably upset with him, thinking like, right, he bailed on Isaiah like always. And then I was like, right, something might have happened to him. And at the very least, the last time you guys saw each other, things were amicable. So it's not like things were bad. But yeah, they end up going to the warehouse place that Mark killed Frank at, and it's like, she says this is a very sad place to die, because she can read like, yeah, the fact is we haven't heard from him, his phone just suddenly went like dark here. It's like, right, finds his sobriety chip, and eventually Ben runs the DNA like on it, and it turns out it's Frank's fingerprints, and she knew it already, and she ended up having to break the news to Isaiah. It's like, because he started thinking like, right, Dad doesn't love me. And she's like, what are you telling me? It's like, he hasn't texted me back. It's like, but your dad loves you with every molecule in his body, don't ever for once think. But it's like, she had to tell him the truth, because if she didn't, Isaiah would have gone on thinking like, oh, his dad didn't love him. And it's like, I don't want you having that picture in your mind, considering like what the truth might unveil. So she kind of had no choice but to also tell him the hard truth of something might have happened to your dad. And he's like, is Dad dead? And she's like, I don't know. So, and for Isaiah, that is clear. Like, it's for him, it's like, if Dad was still around, like, if he was okay, he would have came here. And like, once again, I don't believe Eleanor knows that the drop of the blood she got a while back came from Isaiah's dad. And I don't know if that truth is ever going to be revealed to either one of them. Eventually, whether they'll end up finding his body or not is going to be a whole other question. It is at the bottom of the water and not like in the tunnels like the other bodies, so who knows if they'll find it or discover it or whatever. Because fortunately for Mark, he was like, yeah, the place was already... cameras are already turned. I don't know if Mark did that or whether it just happened to be that type of area, because as it's like, right, this is probably around the place where drug dealing stuff happens, so they wouldn't want that getting caught on camera. So it's probably, and it seems like it predates even Mark and Frank's encounter, so it kind of worked out in their favor in that regard. Not unless Mark did do that, but I'm assuming based on the conversation, it made it sound like that was already kind of a thing all of that, so. Oh, but there's also the little snafu of, cool, there's another set of prints on the coin, and I'm just like, I didn't pay attention to it during the intro, and I'm trying to think, did Mark ever touch the coin? Which there's a good possibility he did, which you're like, man, that's going to suck. I mean, granted, there's databases you're going to have to look through. It's like, well, it depends on if Mark's in the database, because he might not be. Because it could be the person that Frank was with, that he was with when he got that chip. Like, that could have been his sponsor or something, who might have a record or something. But you're like, well, Mark's done a lot of stuff over the past 10 years. And yeah, he might be going by a different name. It almost seemed like he had changed his name, like going by Marcus, like a fake identity, or maybe it's other identities he's had. Either way, it's just like, oh, it's only a matter of time before Naomi finds out about that, and it's going to complicate things. But at the very least, it ends on kind of a very bittersweet note that Isaiah reached out to her and he apologized for not reaching back out to her, and he's like, I found out my dad died, and she went there to hold him and comfort him, and because she knows better than anyone what it's like to lose a parent. She also brought up something interesting where she brings up she's never killed anyone before. So because that's what made me wonder, like, oh, like, you know, her mom being dead, is it like, did her mom, it most likely had to be, because I was thinking like maybe she lost control and ended up killing her mom or something like that. That was kind of a theory I have, and I'm like, well, the fact that she says like she's never killed anyone must mean like, I mean, not unless her mom made the sacrifices like, you'll bleed me dry, let me be her blood source. I don't think so. But it's most likely a situation of she probably got sick and died. That's probably just because the world sucks and just that type of situation just is too commonplace. So, but obviously she knows what it's like to lose a parent. So she can be like, it doesn't make it any easier, but even if it's just a 1% making him feel better and just holding him and making sure he's okay, you know, that speaks volumes and that means a lot. So we also touched on it a little bit too, the conversation about, because Eleanor was like, whoa, I didn't know you still pray. I just assumed like when you stopped going to church. But he's like, no, the reason why he stopped going to church is because it reminded him too much of his mom, of Eleanor's mom. But he does it from time to time just because he believes that God's not listening, but in this instant, you know, considering they were going to go out together and infiltrate this place because Eleanor wanted to help because she didn't want to be a monster anymore. She wanted to be able to be a normal person, and especially where things were between her and I was about to call him Elijah, her and Isaiah at that time. She really wanted to hopefully find. She was even more motivated to find a cure. It's like, I found a friend for the first time. Well, there's something more than that. We'll have to wait and see. But it's like someone that I really like and care about. So I want to not be a monster. I don't want to scare him about being what I am. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But also, Mark told Zeke that he might want to lay low and get out of town for a bit. So we probably won't be seeing Zeke for a while. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe he'll stick around with all of this, but it's like, no. But for Zeke, he does gain, like, not an appreciation, but more an understanding of everything that Mark has had to do for the past 10 years with all of this. So that, you know, I think it makes it a little thing of like, because it's one thing to be a little sympathetic, but now you've like literally stepped in his shoes, even though it's just for a tiny bit, realizing that this is what he's had to do and shoulder and take care of all this kind of on his own. But that's also because he didn't let Eleanor in. It's like, right, he was like, I'm your parent, I'm the one that should be doing the bad stuff, and maybe that'll still hold true going forward, but it is more Eleanor saying like, no, going forward, we are a team. Like, all we can do is hope for the future, but we are in this together and we'll figure it out. No more kind of you going on it alone, like, let me help you. Like, this is about me. And she's like, I believe you about everything. I know we have, at the very least, we have the drug. So that is something in our corner. We have somewhere to start at the very least, you know? So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.